In the stories that have it, the mentor character plays an important role in the hero's journey. Typically, the mentor is much older than the protagonist and imparts valuable wisdom on our hero. And while we've gotten a lot of interesting mentor characters over the years, from classics like Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid to modern-day household names like Master Shifu from Kung Fu Panda, I want to focus on a character that perfectly embodies what it's like to be a mentor, with a twist that keeps the character archetype fresh. And of course, I'm talking about Peter B. Parker from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And to talk about why this character is so brilliant, I will have to discuss spoilers, so you have been warned. And with that out of the way, I think we first need to talk about who Peter B. is. So Peter B. Parker is a version of Spider-Man that's down on his luck. He's worn the mask for over a decade, and it's shown to be a heavy one. He's a middle-aged, overweight, broke, divorced, miserable version of the beloved character, and we, the audience, are kind of led to believe that he's pathetic. But what I love about this iteration of the hero is that it subtly teaches Miles and us, the audience, that you don't have to be perfect to be Spider-Man. And longtime fans of the character know this. Peter Parker's Spider-Man is one of the most bullied characters in comic book history, because he just always seems to be struggling with juggling the realities of both hero and civilian life. That, and even though he saves lives on the daily, the character always seems to be strapped for cash. It's also interesting to see an older take on Peter Parker, since we've already seen 3 different versions of the character start out in high school, at least on the big screen. And I think it's faithful to see that even though the character has grown up, he's still a loser behind the mask. But of course, Miles doesn't know any of this. So him seeing a version of Spider-Man that's not perfect must come as a huge shock to him. Because to a regular kid like Miles Morales, Spider-Man, or any other superhero for that matter, would seem like a title that is larger than life, and to most people, unattainable. But the existence of Peter B cements that idea that anyone can wear the mask. And if this middle-aged man failure can be Spider-Man, why can't he? Which leads me to my next point. One of the most important things about being Spider-Man is that there is no right way to be Spider-Man. And Peter B, as a character, understands this perfectly. Because here's the thing about Spider-Man. It's not a title that's earned through training and acquisition of knowledge passed down from one person to the next. The mask isn't a black belt. It is an identity that is realized. The thing is, not every Spider person fully understands this. Because Gwen, Spider-Noir, Penny, and Spider-Ham all start piling on Miles and focusing on what he can't do. They bombard him with questions and focus on everything that they have that Miles lacks, but Peter B is seemingly the only character that knows and believes in his ability and vouches for what he can do. In fact, he's the one who even tells everyone to back off and the others have to convince him that Miles isn't ready. And this scene perfectly illustrates how good of a mentor Peter B is when it comes to teaching people how to be a Spider-Man, because he focuses on what Miles brings to the table rather than what he lacks. Because Peter B understands that being a spider person isn't about being super intelligent, an expert combatant, or comically powerful. And he understands this because he himself didn't have everything figured out when he was starting out as Spider-Man. Because in this film, and I mean specifically in this film, nobody gets to decide who or what Spider-Man is supposed to be. Because we've seen so many different versions of Peter never know when he would be ready to be Spider-Man. Because it's something he decided for himself. And that process of owning that identity and claiming it for yourself is one of the most important steps to becoming Spider-Man. And I think the beauty here is that the film does show that Peter B isn't an infallible mentor and that everything he says should be taken as definitive truth. Because early on in the film, he says that Spider-Man doesn't wear a cape and rips it off Miles. But then later on, when he, Gwen, and Miles go to visit Aunt May, they see that one of Spider-Man's alternate costumes does feature a cape. This shows that while Peter knows a lot about being Spider-Man, his word isn't dogma, and Miles is allowed to disagree with him. But just because the title of Spider-Man isn't bestowed, that doesn't mean that the knowledge on how to be an effective one can't be. And that's part of what makes Peter B such a good mentor, because he's able to teach surprisingly well. Remember that the first Spider-Man, Peter Parker, had to figure out everything on his own. He didn't have the luxury of a mentor like Miles does. Thus, the line, "everyone knows that the best way to learn is under intense life-threatening pressure," actually makes sense for Peter to deliver, because that's exactly how Peter learned how to use his powers. Because in most continuities, Peter Parker never had someone teach him how to be Spider-Man. And yet, despite Peter being self-taught, he still ends up being a great mentor, because the mark of one is being able to break down unique and complicated concepts into a way that their students can understand. And because he had to teach himself from nothing, he understands what it means to need guidance. Actually, I think that's a theme in writing. The best mentor characters are always broken in some way. After all, to teach, they had to be in a position where they needed to learn. For example, Haymitch from the Hunger Games series is very much a broken character. Being the only surviving winner from District 12, he's not only had to learn to survive the games as a youth, as well as the aftermath, but also watch his trained tributes, his students, get slaughtered in the games year after year. He very much has a lot to teach Katniss and Peeta about navigating the event, and the fact that they were able to play the crowd is part of why they were able to win, but the guy is definitely a tragic character. Meanwhile, there's a very good counterexample as a character that never needed to struggle and is shown to be a horrible teacher in comparison. Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen. He is shown to be a terrible mentor because he's naturally talented. As a prodigy, he has simply never been in the position where he needed to struggle as his students did. And while we don't get to see Peter B's journey as Spider-Man, it's safe to assume that he probably struggled at first too, simply because that's how all his iterations started out. And we actually see how him being a teacher comes into play with Miles. A good example of this is in the scene where Peter B and Miles are trying to replace the Goober by infiltrating Alchemax. Miles is shown to be struggling with wall crawling, specifically the detaching part, and it's only when Peter B tells him to relax his mind that Miles is actually able to let go of the ceiling. Another example is in the following scene where Miles is shown to not be able to swing properly. Peter teaches Miles how to use his web shooters and swing by breaking down the process in a way that Miles can understand. And then he provides positive reinforcement by telling Miles that he's a natural. And it's because of Peter B's belief in Miles that he is able to grow so much. He went from ruining a girl's hair to being able to detach on a whim, and from never having held a web shooter in his life to gliding effortlessly through the air. Miles had grown so much because of Peter B's tutelage, but the beauty of their relationship is that Miles wasn't the only one growing. The main reason we're told that Peter B and his MJ couldn't make it work was because Peter B feared the thought of becoming a father while his MJ wanted kids. He probably thought that he wouldn't be able to raise a child properly because of his responsibilities as Spider-Man, but by teaching Miles and helping him realize his potential, Peter B shows that he can be good with kids if he puts in an effort. Unlike a lot of other master-student relationships in media, his relationship with Miles heals him in a way that he needed to be healed before he's able to get his life back together. Because being a good father also means being a good mentor. The fact that everything he teaches Miles gets called back to him at some point in the story simply proves how effective Peter B is as a mentor. For example, when he breaks free from Miles' restraints, he mentions not to watch the mouth, but to watch the hands. Later on, when Miles rejoins the Spider People, he repeats the same line, taking the Goober back from Peter B as the latter is trying to explain that he should be the one making the sacrifice. And then we see this again immediately after, when Miles swings and moves across various surfaces in order to get into position to place the Goober. The irony of this scene is that Gwen tells Peter B that he definitely didn't teach Miles any of that, but he actually did, because it was Peter B that taught Miles how to swing and detach. And finally, when Peter B tells Miles that he's not ready and tries to keep him from the collider in an effort to ensure his safety, he incapacitates him with a sweeping kick and grabs his shirt before asking him to prove that he's capable of using his unique powers. But later on, we see Miles repeat this exact same move to Peter B when he tries to sacrifice himself, and even repeats the same words to him when he asks for reassurance that he won't mess things up again. It's a leap of faith. And I think the fact that Peter B asks Miles, whom he spent the entire film training, for reassurance is beautiful, because it shows that Peter B and Miles' relationship is no longer that of master and student, but of spider person to spider person. They are peers, equals. And this concludes Peter B's arc in the film. He has nothing left to teach Miles because he's already taken to heart everything that he could have taught him, but also he himself has grown as a character because of his experience of training him. Because the purpose of mentorship isn't to create followers or disciples, it's to create equals. And it's through Miles that he realized that he does have what it takes to be a dad, and that he just needed a reminder of what it means to be Spider-Man. And I'm not talking about how anybody can wear the mask or how great power comes with you know what. I'm talking about a line that's repeated throughout this film, and a theme that's been encapsulated in Spider-Man media throughout the character's history. Because even if he's lost all hope in himself, and it's taken some time to do it, Spider-Man always gets back up. And maybe that's the beauty of Peter B. Parker. He spent the entire film teaching Miles how to become Spider-Man, only to realize that he was reclaiming that identity for himself. And we see this reality manifested in the next film. Peter B. becomes a dad, and finds happiness and a loving relationship. Peter B. Parker from Into the Spider-Verse isn't the perfect mentor because he has all the answers, but because he knows what it feels like to need someone who does. And I think that's whack.